The version of Lost in Space you saw is the one Jonathan Harris invented because he found the original Dr. Smith so boring that he rewrote the character himself, and the show he created is the only reason anyone remembers the show that aired.
Truly hard to watch.
Really? Today we're counting down 14 facts about Lost in Space. Stick around for number 1, because the writers built a villain and Jonathan Harris built a legend, one rewritten line at a time. 14. CBS had already rejected Star Trek before buying this show when Irwin Allen pitched Lost in Space to CBS in the early 1960s. The network was in the middle of evaluating other science fiction concepts. One of them was Star Trek. CBS passed on Gene Roddenberry's pitch and bought Allen's show instead. NBC picked up Star Trek. Both shows ended up on the air at roughly the same time. Lost in Space premiered on CBS in September 1965, Star Trek on NBC. A year later, in September 1966, the two series ran simultaneously for 2 seasons and became rivals in the public imagination almost immediately, representing 2 entirely different philosophies about what science fiction on television could be. Star Trek was serious, allegorical, and intellectually ambitious. Lost in Space was a family adventure that steadily became camp. CBS had chosen the family and let the starship go to the other network. Both shows were eventually canceled. Only one of them became the most commercially successful franchise in science fiction history. The network that passed on Star Trek got the robot instead. 13. The original pilot cost $600,000 and was hidden. For 28 years before the Lost in Space that audiences know existed, there was another one entirely. The unaired pilot, titled No Place to Hide, was filmed in January 1965 at a cost of $600,000, which in today's terms represents several million dollars. It was a straight science fiction adventure. A family on a 98-year mission to Alpha Centauri, no villain, no robot, no internal conflict, and no Dr. Smith. CBS looked at the finished pilot and told Allen it needed human conflict. Allen went back and built it in. The result was 2 new characters, Dr. Zachary Smith and the robot, and a wholesale revision of the premise. The original pilot was shelved. It circulated for years among underground video collectors, but was not broadcast on television until 1993, when the Sci-Fi Channel aired it as part of its first pilot playhouse introduced by June Lockhart. The show that premiered in September 1965 was built on top of a completely different show that nobody saw for nearly 3 decades. 12. The Jupiter 2 set was more expensive than the Enterprise. The interior of the Jupiter 2, the Robinson spacecraft, cost $350,000 to build. At the time, that made it the most expensive single set ever constructed for a television production. For context, the USS Enterprise on Star Trek, which was designed and built around the same period, cost less. 2 rival space shows were being produced simultaneously in Hollywood, and the one that history remembers as the more serious and sophisticated of the 2 had a cheaper ship. The Jupiter 2's interior featured 2 levels, the upper flight deck, with its sleek circular design, and the lower deck with sleeping quarters and equipment bays, both built with enough physical detail that the cast could actually live in the space rather than merely stand in front of it. Allen understood that the ship was a character. He spent accordingly. The show that became synonymous with camp and Alien of the Week storytelling launched from the most expensive television set in the history of the medium. It looked exactly that good from day one. 11. The pilot's music was stolen from Bernard Herrmann. The unaired pilot, No Place to Hide, had no original score. John Williams, credited throughout the series as Johnny Williams, had not yet been engaged to write music for the show when the pilot was filmed. The solution was to pull existing music from Bernard Herrmann's scores for 20th Century Fox feature films and track it over the footage. Herrmann's haunting compositions from The Day the Earth Stood Still, Journey to the Center of the Earth, and Beneath the 12-Mile Reef were laid in as temporary music across the pilot. Herrmann's work was so appropriate, so perfectly atmospheric for what Allen was trying to achieve, that some of it continued to be used even after Williams came aboard and wrote his own themes for the series. A show that became famous for John Williams' music launched on the back of Bernard Herrmann's existing work. Two of the greatest composers in Hollywood history shared the same spaceship, one of them without knowing it. 10. Dr. Smith was meant to die in the first few episodes. When Jonathan Harris was cast as Dr. Zachary Smith, the character was written as a short-lived antagonist. The original plan was straightforward. Smith would appear in the early episodes as a genuine threat, a saboteur who had doomed the Robinsons, and would be written out once the family was established in their new situation. Harris understood the problem immediately. Why would anyone keep such a despicable character around? His words, he saw that Smith, as written, was a dead end, a villain with no function. Once the sabotage was done, so he began changing him without asking permission. Harris started rewriting his own dialogue and adjusting his performance to make Smith more entertaining than threatening. The flamboyance, the cowardice, the elaborate insults directed at the robot, none of that was in the scripts. Harris invented it all himself, scene by scene, week by week, until the character everyone remembers had replaced the character everyone had forgotten. The man who was supposed to disappear quietly became the reason people kept watching. 9. The role of Dr. Smith was first offered to someone else. Before Jonathan Harris was cast as Dr. Zachary Smith, the role was offered to Roger C. Carmel. Carmel was a character actor with strong television credentials who would later appear on Star Trek as the recurring villain, Harry Mudd, one of that show's most memorable guest characters. Had Carmel accepted Lost in Space, the two rival sci-fi series of the 1960s would both have featured him as a recurring antagonist. He declined. Harris got the part. What followed was one of television's most remarkable character transformations, Harris taking a role Carmel had passed on and building it into the show's dominant personality through sheer force of invention. The man who said no to Smith went on to play a con man on the show that CBS had said no to instead. The parallel casting history of the two series runs deeper than most people realize. 8. The robot was worn by one man and voiced by another. The B9 environmental control robot, known simply as Robot, was operated throughout the series by actor Bob May, who wore the costume. May was inside the suit for every episode, operating the arms and moving through the sets in a costume built by prop maker Bob Stewart. He delivered his own vocal performances during filming to give his fellow cast members something to react to on set. Those vocals were then replaced entirely in post-production by Dick Tufeld, who dubbed every line the robot ever spoke across all 3 seasons. Tufeld was also the show's narrator, the voice that opened each episode with the mission briefing. 2 men made one character. May gave the robot its physical presence and its relationship with the cast. Tufeld gave it the voice that generations of viewers grew up hearing. Neither received the other's credit. The robot is arguably the most recognizable character in the show's history. Its existence required 2 separate human beings who never occupied the frame at the same time. 7. Guy Williams retired from acting after the show was canceled. Guy Williams had been famous before Lost in Space. From 1957 to 1961, he had played Zorro on Disney's television series. One of the most beloved adventure roles in early American television, Lost in Space gave him Professor John Robinson, the patriarch of a spacefaring family, and seemed to position him for a long career as a leading man. When CBS canceled the show in 1968, Williams was 44 years old. He never took another significant acting role. He retired from the industry entirely, moved to Argentina, where both Zorro and Lost in Space had made him enormously popular, and became something close to a celebrity figure there for the rest of his life. He was reportedly recognized everywhere he went in Buenos Aires, beloved by generations who had grown up watching him on both shows. He died in Argentina in 1989 at the age of 65, having spent his final 2 decades as a retired actor living inside the affection of a country that never forgot him. America canceled his show. Argentina kept him for the rest of his life. 6. Irwin Allen directed the show. Using a hammer and a bucket, Irwin Allen's directing style on set was not subtle. When he needed the cast to simulate the Jupiter 2, lurching and shaking through turbulence, he didn't rely on the camera or the actor's imagination. He grabbed a hammer and an aluminum pail, stood near the cast, and started banging. He would shout left or right while hammering the pail in rhythm. and the actors would throw themselves from side to side in time with the noise. Angela Cartwright, who played Penny Robinson, recalled the experience as completely ridiculous. The cast stumbling back and forth at Irwin Allen's direction while he slammed metal objects together a few feet away. Bill Mumy, who played Will Robinson, remembered Allen using a megaphone even when standing directly next to the person he was addressing. Allen described himself as a showman in the tradition of old Hollywood, more P.T. Barnum than studio craftsman. He got what he needed. The Jupiter 2 lurched convincingly for 3 seasons. The hammer and bucket method was never replaced by anything more sophisticated. 5. John Williams wrote the theme build as Johnny Williams. Every episode of Lost in Space opens and closes with one of the most recognizable television themes of the 1960s. It was written by John Williams. In the production credits, he appears as Johnny Williams, the name he used professionally before his film career made him one of the most celebrated composers in Hollywood history. Williams contributed music to only 4 of the series' 83 episodes, but wrote the main theme and its variations that define the show's sonic identity across all 3 seasons. He created a more vibrant fanfare for the 3rd season as the show shifted toward its most outlandish storytelling. The man who would go on to write the scores for Jaws, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, E.T., Schindler's List, and Jurassic Park built his early television reputation one space theme at a time. Lost in Space sits in his filmography between early television assignments and the film career that followed. Johnny Williams became John Williams somewhere in the years after the Robinsons stopped being Lost. 4. The show was canceled because Irwin Allen missed a deadline. The cancellation of Lost in Space after 3 seasons has been attributed to various causes: declining ratings, rising costs, an audience that had skewed too young for advertisers. All of those factors were real, but according to June Lockhart, who played Maureen Robinson, the final nail was simpler and more specific. Irwin Allen had promised CBS a set of story outlines for the proposed 4th season. The network needed those outlines to commit to the fall schedule, not for creative reasons, but to be certain there were enough scripts to avoid costly production delays. The deadline came. Allen had not delivered the outlines. CBS was in the middle of scheduling meetings and needed an answer. Without the outlines, they wouldn't renew the series. The show that had entertained millions of viewers for 3 seasons, that had launched John Williams' career and made the robot a cultural icon, was canceled in part because its creator failed to hand in a stack of papers on time. Bill Mumy had already written a script for the first episode of the 4th season. Allen turned it down and moved on to his next project. 3. Lost in Space was the favorite show of John F. Kennedy Jr. Among the show's viewers during its original run was a 9-year-old boy living in the White House. John F. Kennedy Jr. was a devoted fan of Lost in Space throughout the series. The show premiered in September 1965, roughly 2 years after the assassination of his father, and ran until 1968. Kennedy Jr. was the right age to be completely captured by the Robinsons, the robot, and the weekly parade of alien visitors to their unnamed planet. The fact has been documented in multiple biographical accounts of Kennedy's childhood. A child processing an enormous private loss was watching a family navigate the impossible together, week after week, holding together under conditions that should have broken them. Whether that resonance meant anything specific to him is not recorded. What is recorded is that he watched every episode and considered it his favorite show. The most scrutinized child in America spent his Saturday nights lost in space with the Robinsons. 2. The show stole footage from its own unused pilot. For 5 episodes, when CBS ordered the series into production with Dr. Smith and the robot added, the production faced an immediate practical problem. The unaired pilot, No Place to Hide, had been shot at considerable expense and contained footage that was too good to simply abandon. The solution was to reuse it. 4 of the first 5 broadcast episodes were constructed by interweaving new material featuring Smith and the robot with footage pulled directly from the rejected pilot. Scenes that had originally shown a conflict-free family mission were recut and recontextualized to incorporate characters who hadn't been present when they were filmed. The fifth episode, The Derelict, was the first to be built entirely from scratch with the full cast. A production that had spent $600,000 on a pilot. Nobody would see recycled that investment across the opening month of broadcast. The show that audiences watched in September and October 1965 was substantially the show CBS had already rejected, reassembled around the two characters added to make it worth airing. One, Jonathan Harris, invented the character. Everyone remembers the Dr. Smith that audiences watched across 83 episodes of Lost in Space was not the character Irwin Allen created. It was not the character the writers wrote. It was the character Jonathan Harris invented, rewrote, improvised, and built over 3 seasons without ever being formally asked to do so. Allen had written Smith as a ruthless Cold War spy, calculating, physically capable, morally unambiguous. Harris looked at that character and saw a dead end. He began adjusting his lines in rehearsal, adding flamboyance and cowardice in small doses at first, then larger ones as he realized nobody was stopping him. He turned to Bill Mumy, who played Will Robinson, after learning his own lines and rehearsed using his own invented dialogue instead of the scripts. Mumy later said that Harris, completely on his own, created the character they all know, the sniveling, theatrical, self-important coward who hid behind a 9-year-old boy while crying about the pain. That character hijacked the show, became its center of gravity, and is the primary reason Lost in Space is remembered at all. The writers built a villain. Jonathan Harris built a legend. He did it one rewritten line at a time, a show CBS bought instead of Star Trek, built on a rejected pilot and saved from obscurity by the actor who ignored the script. Which fact hit hardest? Drop it in the comments. Subscribe for more deep dives into the television that raised us. Until next time.